organizes twice a month. From the behalf of ISIP, I want to welcome you all to the lecture, inshallah. We will start the lecture now, inshallah, and we know that more people will join, so we will add them as we speak, inshallah. We will briefly just do an introduction of ISIP, and then we will hand it over to our main lecturer today, Ustad Muhammad, inshallah. So most welcome. It's an honor to be with all of you, and thank you also, Professor Habib, for joining us. We're so honored to have such an excellent scholar with us today. Jazakallah khairan. So let's start here with, I'll just share my screen, dear participants. All right. Just 1 second, dear brothers and sisters, while we proceed. All right, I hope you see my screen, dear brothers and sisters. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat. As we're an international movement and organization, we have members and participants, excellent brothers and sisters from all over the world. So feel free to represent your, just introduce yourself, and you can also change your names in the Zoom and just write which country of origin you have. It's such an honor to be with all of you. So Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salawat wa salam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa min wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. I hope everything is fine with all of you. I hope everything is fine with all of your families. It's such an honor to be with all of you. Well, most welcome to our lecture today. Today's lecture will be about neuroscience from an Islamic perspective, legacy from classical Islamic psychology. This is a very interesting topic indeed. And we've been organizing so many lectures, seminars, conferences, halaqas, courses throughout the years. And this is the first time we actually are having a lecture from this perspective when it comes to speaking about ilm al-nafs and Islamic psychology. And we're so honored to have with us Brother Muhammad Muzammil Fikri Suadu from Indonesia. Our dear excellent Ustad will share more information from his thesis, which is about this topic. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I also want to just thank Sister Fatima Ahmed, co-founder of ISIP, for helping us today, and also Sister Nadira, who is the project manager for our international lecture series. They will be helping us with organizing this event, and they have also organized the event before us meeting today. So thank you, sisters, for your excellent works. So today's agenda, dear brothers and sisters, we will start by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, and then we will go through the welcoming guidelines. We will give a certificate of appreciation to our Ustad, Brother Muhammad, and also to all of our members, of course, who are joining today. After the lecture with Ustad Muhammad, we will have a Q&A session where you guys will be able to ask your questions and share your reflections with Ustad Muhammad. Feel free to use the Zoom chat to utilize your reflections and questions, inshallah. And we will share some resources in the Zoom chat throughout the session. And we will just end the whole lecture today with some closing du'as, inshallah. So let's start by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Malik yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim wala dallin. Ameen. Sadaqallahu. All right, dear brothers and sisters, most welcome. A little bit about our Zoom etiquettes. Please just keep your microphones muted at all times so that we can give the best experience to all of you as Ustad Muhammad will speak, inshallah. Please do not record or do any screenshots because we will offer the PowerPoint presentation. With your permission, Ustad Muhammad, is it okay that we share the PowerPoint presentation with all the participants? So we will ask Brother Muhammad for that permission, inshallah. And for all of you who registered for the session today, we will email out the recordings afterwards. We will add it to ISIP's YouTube channel within a couple of days, inshallah. And it will also be shared in all of our WhatsApp groups and social medias as well. All your questions or reflections, please use the Zoom chat for that, and we will address them to Ustad Muhammad in the Q&A part of the session. If you need any live transcriptions, dear excellent brothers and sisters, please press the More button in the Zoom and request for that, and then you will have access to live transcriptions as well, inshallah. A little bit about ISIP's mission statement, dear brothers and sisters. ISIP, we're trying to be an inclusive space designed to connect people with diverse backgrounds interested in the field of Islamic psychology. So inclusivity for us is that people, no matter which ethnical background, no matter which social, economical background, should benefit from the sacred knowledge that Islamic psychology is providing for us. So everything that we do in ISIP is free of charge, of course. So we aim to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices in a free and accessible manner. So all of our local and regional chapters, we have chapters in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, until North America, the Arab world. Everything we do there is free of charge. All of our lectures, seminars, resource sharing, and support groups, etc. Is free of charge. We also want to be a platform to enable further development of people's personal and professional interests, studies and understanding of Islamic psychology within their communities and countries of origin. As we're an international movement, we try to also have our local and regional chapters where we try to fill the gaps in your local context. So this is some of our mission statement. Ways to contribute to the movement. Feel free to subscribe to ISIP's YouTube channel where you can benefit from all the lectures that we have organized. We do lectures in many different languages, in English, in Arabic, in Turkish, in Urdu, in Bahasa Indonesian, Malayalam, and many other languages as well. You can also join one of our Islamic psychology WhatsApp groups for resource sharing, and the link for these groups will be shared in the Zoom chat throughout the session, inshallah. You can also become a member of ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, via our website at www.isip.foundation. Membership is free, of course, and then you can get access to our digital library with over 1,000 resources within the field of Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health. If you want to join our local and regional chapters, we will also share our email address. Feel free to reach out to us through email and we can add you to the teams. If there is no local chapter in your region, we're more than open to help you to establish a local chapter. Right now, we're establishing chapters in Maldives and West Africa and Bosnia and East Africa and in many other countries of region as well. If you're representing a university or if you're representing an association who is interested in these type of questions that we work with Islamic psychology, well-being, mental health, etc., feel free to reach out to us because we do a lot of partnerships with universities, associations, and organizations. We would love to work with you guys and collaborate and do and establish MOUs, inshallah. Triple IT, for instance, I know Ustad Habib is from Triple IT, is one of the great organizations that we admire, and we would love to work with you guys, inshallah. You guys are doing an amazing job. So feel free to reach out to us if you need anything. We will always be at your service. And from the behalf of ISIP and all of my excellent colleagues, most welcome. Now, let's go to the main person for this event today. We're so honored to host today Ustad Muhammad Muzammil Fikri Suadu. Please forgive me for not pronouncing your name, your surname in the best manner, but I hope I pronounced it correctly. He's a neuroscience researcher with 6 years of experience in his work, hands-on experience as political advisor based on a study of social behavior that influenced by brain characteristic. He's been vice chairman of Indonesian Applied Neuroscience Synergy Association, Syntesa, from 2017 to 2022. He's also deputy secretary of Institute of Dawah and Community Development, Majlis National Corps Alumni, HMI, alumni of Islamic Student Association. He has a master's degree in Faculty of Psychology in University of Indonesia, Applied Psychology, Human Capital, and Knowledge Management. MashaAllah, excellent background. And this is just a certificate of appreciation, dear brother Muhammad, from Sister Fatima and myself and all of our colleagues, Sister Nadir and rest of the team in ISIP, in appreciation of your time and efforts and in recognition of your continuing excellency in the field of Islamic psychology. And we will email this certificate for you as well, dear Ustad. Thank you. So thank you all, dear brothers and sisters, for attending, and please forgive us for any shortcomings and make dua for us, and please fill out the short feedback form that we will share at the end of the session as well. So allow me now to stop sharing my screen. And without any further ado, dear Ustad, brother Muhammad, the floor is yours. Most welcome. We're looking forward to learn from your vast amount of knowledge. Welcome.
Thank you, my brother Said Jamaluddin Miri. It's an honor for me to join with this lecture because I know this community of ISIP is one of the great group which have attention to the issue related to Islamic psychology. So first I will say thank you to all of you to join with this lecture. It's a very interesting topic because as said by our brother Said Jamaluddin Miri, it is the first time topic in lecture in ISIP tonight. So my intention is just to address that Islamic neuroscience or neuroscience from the classical Islamic perspective has so many legacy, especially from the classical Islamic tradition, with intended to the legacy from the peripatetic psychological tradition. So, because as we know, the issue in sorry, it's clear. You can hear my voice.
It was just some people who didn't mute their microphones. Please, participants, when you join, if you could mute your microphones, we would really appreciate it. Jazakallah khairan, dear brothers and sisters. Please go ahead, Ustad.
Okay, thank you. So my intention tonight is just to address that the neuroscience is not only the science originate from the Western epistemological tradition, because today the claim is that neuroscience is totally just come from the Western science perspective, and the Islamic world the Islamic tradition has no contribution to this science of knowledge. So this is why this lecture is, for me, is very, very important topics, very important issue. Okay, we start this lecture tonight. So what exactly is neuroscience? Neuroscience, as I said before, is a science of neuron or brain that come from the epistemological tradition of the modern science. So because neuroscience is come from the Western tradition of modern science, so it's totally just come from the epistemological tradition of Darwin evolution. And they claim, because this science is just come from the epistemological tradition of Darwin evolution, they claims that Islam has no contribution at all for this branch of science. So neuroscience may be described as the science of neuron or nervous system that plays important roles in generating human thought and behavior. So what exactly is neuroscience? Is science about this organ. This organ is our brain. The brain is the organ inside our head. So this is the structure. And this is the anatomical picture of the brain. You can see the picture here. So the neuroscience is science that relate with all of this issue, including the higher mental function, what our emotion, and so on. Neuroscience also is science of the neuron. Neuron is the functional unit of the brain. So our brain inside our head consists of 100 billion of this neuron. And each of these neurons, they make communication each other to produce and generate our mind, our thought, our emotion, our feelings, and all of our mental function. But as I say before, that is rather unfortunate that the history of neuroscience is almost entirely written by the Western scholars. As a result, the contribution of Islamic science to discipline of knowledge is very little to know to the modern scholars. In my experience as a medical student years ago, when I studied neuroscience, I never have any information about the Ibn or the neuroscience from the Ibn from Al-Farabi, or from Ibn Rus, because the neuroscience is totally just written by the Western scholar. So we have no access to the very rich of legacy of the source of from the Islamic tradition. And the other fact is now our contemporary Muslim scholars, especially who focus to the issue of Islamic psychology, when they address the issue of psychology, they just totally speaking about the issue of the soul, which independently from the brain, the heart, and the spirit. So the consequence or the impact is we see the soul just as a metaphysical dimension. So like a Casper movie, if you watching the movie Casper, you see that Casper something soul we identified just something like that, very metaphysical, immaterial substance. Whereas if our go to our classical Islamic tradition, the soul in their perspective is one entity with the brain, with the heart, and with the spirit. So this is the contradiction that happened in our contemporary Islamic world today, because I have discussed with one of the prominent psychologists in Indonesia, the Professor Mulyadi Kartanegara. I'm asking here, Professor, why the contemporary Islamic scholars, especially the philosophy or psychology, when they speak about the issue of psychology, they just focus to the issue of human soul, especially with the intellect or akal. And they divine that the soul is a different dimension with the human body. So what happened, we go to the issue of duality, the body and the soul. When I read the book of the Professor Fazlur Rahman, The Maritime in Quran, Prof. Fazlur Rahman speak that Quran has no vision about duality, because the vision of Quran is the vision of Tawhid, the unity. Out of the human dimension, we must look by the one single entity where it's not separate one and others. So when I do the extensive survey of contemporary literature of neuroscience, just a few scholars, knowledge by the Western or by our Islamic tradition, one of them is Avicenna contribution. In fact, if we go to classical Islamic literature, we can see that many of our Muslim peripatetics start from Al-Kindi until Ibn Rus. All of them write so many interesting topics relate with the issue of the neuroscience, especially the issue of the brain science of the nerve or the neuron. I'm also surprised when I read their contribution in the thousand years ago. So I decide to focus to this issue. The issue is the neuroscience from the classical Islamic perspective, because I totally looks that our Islamic tradition makes so many contribution in the issue related to neuroscience. We will see in the next my presentation. Okay, now we go to the what we have in the classical Islamic psychology. Classical Islamic psychology I mentioned here based on the philosophy of the soul, especially relate with the school of thought of the peripatetic school of thought. Start from Al-Kindi and Ibn Rushd. For the purpose of this presentation, the tradition of peripatetic psychology is chosen by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina. I mentioned here their books of Al-Farabi, Mabadi al-Madinah al-Fadila on the perfect state. This book is a political book. They will address the issue of virtue in Muslim community. But what is interesting is in the early part of this book, Al-Farabi addressed the issue of the brain anatomy. For me, it's a very interesting. So by this book, we can see the relation, the connection between the anatomical structure of the brain and the cult and the spirit or ruh with the virtue in the Muslim community. We have the strong relationship expressed by Al-Farabi. And the second book I choose in this for the lecture tonight is the Canon of Medicine or Al-Kanun fi Al-Tib, the book by Avicenna. In this book, Avicenna addressed a beautiful concept about the human as a single entity, start from the spirit, the innate heat, until our bodily organs. So by these two perspectives of the classical Islamic psychology as well as peripatetic philosophy, we can look clearly that the spirit or the heat has a connection in the perspective of biological connection with our biological organ. So by understand this concept of psychology by the peripatetic perspective, we can explain, we can understand how the relation between the spirit or the ruh with a human decision making. So there is a biological connection, clear biological connection. I will explain to you in the next slide. So the first issue is Al-Farabi psychology. I use the book of Al-Farabi Al-Madinah al-Fadila because in here Al-Farabi discussed about the faculty of the soul and its relation to bodily organ. This is the issue because the contemporary scholars just address the issue of the faculty of the soul and without the connection to the bodily organ. So let's same with what I say before, the soul looks like the abstract or the metaphysical entity without no home, no biological home. So sometimes we can find where our soul, and maybe sometimes we think that our soul is already exists outside of our body. So it's very difficult to imagine how the soul is the metaphysical dimension and separate with our body. So it's very difficult for me to understand about the concept of the psychology or philosophy of the soul that addressed by our contemporary Islamic scholars today. So I think what I present this night, to this lecture can help to resolve the problem of duality where exists even in our contemporary Islamic scholars' mind. Okay, in the Al-Madinah Al-Fadilah, Al-Farabi deals with the 5 faculty of the soul, which that is the nutritive faculty of the soul, the perceptive faculty, representative faculty, and intellective faculty, appetitive faculty. But in this time, I did not to explain about this faculty of the soul because so many our scholars explain the topics relate with this issue. I just intend to explain the relation between this faculty of the soul with our biological organ, because I'm a neuroscientist, so my responsibility is just to address the issue that based on the peripatetic tradition psychology, soul is totally material, not immaterial. Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and even Ibn Rus, they all stated that soul is material, is a physical entity, not metaphysical entity or metaphysical dimension. The one and only soul, which is the metaphysical dimension, is related with the issue of the active intellect. The active intellect is the only one soul, metaphysical soul, because the active intellect is not part of human soul. It's a different part of the soul. If we speak about the human soul, so the soul entirely is a physical or material entity. I will explain later. Okay, next is the nutritive faculty. The nutritive faculty is the first faculty arise from the natural heat, or the first faculty arise emanatively from our spirit or our ruh. That's Al-Farabi states about the nutritive faculty of the soul. And next, the animal soul arise from the nutritive faculty, and then the human rational soul arise from the animal faculty. Next, the faculty of sense perception is related with the animal faculty of the soul. The animal faculty of the soul consists of the sense perception, the appetitive or relate with our emotion, what our feeling, our passion, and so on. And then imagination is imaginative faculty is also part of the animal faculty of the soul. Is the imaginative or representative faculty of the soul. And especially for the human, the faculty makes human are unique is the rational faculty of the soul. This faculty of the soul is related with the existence of akal or intellect, which based on Al-Farabi, the passive of or the potential intellect is a material or a physical dimension, not of metaphysical dimension as we consume today. So based on Al-Farabi concept of the faculty of soul, we know that the soul are divided into 3 dimensions. The first is the vegetative faculty of the soul. The second is the animal faculty of the soul, including the sense perception, or affective, or imaginative, locomotive, or our motive and action, and then the human rational faculty of the soul relate with the issue of intellect or akal. So, based on what Al-Farabi explained about the human body, we know that the human body consists of, first is the innate heat or innate spirit, the second is the heart or qalb, next the brain, and then the soul, the nerve, and the organ or the limbs of the body. So we can see the single entity about the human dimension. It is beautiful for me as a neuroscientist, and I also study psychology and I also study philosophy. For me, this is a very, very perfect explanation of the concept of the human comes from the tradition of the Islamic Classical Psychology, especially the peripatetic psychology. So let's we discuss this issue. The first is the innate heat or the innate spirit. Al-Farabi stated that the innate heat or the innate spirit is the principle of life of all living beings. This heat or this spirit are continuously or simultaneously produced in the heart or the qalb. The heart or the qalb, based on the Al-Farabi tradition, is a bodily organ. This is the ruling organ which is not ruled by any other organ of the body. So this is the first sign of what is exactly the heart. The heart is based on the Al-Farabi tradition, is the ruling organ that produce the innate heat or innate spirit, in which the innate heat or innate spirit is the principle of life of all living beings. And also this heat will spread from the heart by the assistance of the brain. So the brain in the Al-Farabi perspective is the secondary organ. The primary organ is the heart. Why the heart is primary? Because inside the heart there is the innate heat or innate spirit, or maybe we can say ruh. It's the language issue, the issue of the Arabic terminology, and that is not my field. So I just explain from my field that why the heart become the most important and being primary organ, because based on the peripatetic tradition, they stated that inside the heart or the qalb there is like the innate heat or innate spirit, in which the innate heat or innate spirit in principle itself is the principle of life of all living beings. So the soul, based on this tradition, is arise emanatively from the innate spirit. So that's why the heart is a very important organ. And the interesting is when Al-Farabi placed the brain as the ruling organ, but not being primary. It is very, very contrast with the modern science, where the modern science claim that the brain is a primary and very fundamental organ of the body. So that's different. the modern science perspective come from the Galen perspective. The Galen is the physician, also a medical doctor in the Yunani era, who claimed that the first important organ is the brain. In the opposite, the philosopher or the Islamic scientists, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rus, and so on, they claim that for them, based on the philosophical tradition, the first important organ is the brain. So is the heart, called. So this is the difference between the two epistemological tradition. The Islamic epistemological tradition hold that the important organ of the body is the heart, whereas the Western tradition, they hold that the important organ is the brain. So it's interesting. So what exactly Al-Farabi addressed with the issue of the brain? So let's see, based on the Al-Farabi peripatetic psychological tradition, the brain is the ruling organ of the body, but not being primary, but secondary. It is ruled by the heart. So the brain rules over all the other organs of the body, but the brain itself is ruled by the heart. So the position like the heart maybe is a king and the brain is the prime minister, to explain the relation between the heart and the brain. So the brain's rules is to distribute the innate heat or innate spirit, distribute to all faculty of the soul, distribute to all organ of the body. So the innate heat which are simultaneously or continuously produced by the heart are distributed to all parts of the soul and all parts of the body by the brain. So this is the executive role of the brain. And also the brain function is to regulate the heat which from the heart in a good temperature, in a good condition. Because when the heat or the spirit is not in a good temperature, the impact is our rational soul cannot function properly. Our organ of the body cannot function properly. So the heat which are produced by the heart, when is received by the brain, so the brain makes the temperature of this heat is in a good condition, and then spreads the heat or the spirit, this innate heat or spirit, to all parts of our body and our soul. Okay. So from this perspective, we can see the anatomical, sorry. From this perspective, we can see the anatomical connection between the spirit or heat, the heart or cold, the brain, and the organs. So impossible for us to speak soul only from the heart, from the brain, from the nerve, and from the organ, as addressed by our majority contemporary Islamic scholars today. Very, very impossible for us to understand about what the issue of with the soul in their perspective, because based on the perspective of classical Islamic tradition, we can see the strong anatomical connection between the spirit or heat inside the heart and then distribute to the brain, and then from the brain spreads to all parts of the soul and organ of our body through the facilitating function of the nerve. So Al-Farabi mentioned about the two kind of nerve, the sensory and the motory nerve. Al-Farabi speak all of this concept 1,000 years ago. So I'm very surprised. Al-Farabi is a very greatest thinkers, and I think what the issue addressed by Al-Farabi can resolve the problem of duality today. Next, okay, I try to make the simple picture about the Al-Farabi concept of psychology. If we look in what I explained before, so we can define that the human consists of the innate heat, and the innate heat lie inside our heart, which is the heart is the most primary organ of the body, and then the brain, the secondary organ of the body, because in the statement of Al-Farabi, the brain has a close relationship with the heart as a secondary organ of the body. And then from the brain, this innate heat spread to the soul and to bodily organs through the facilitated by the nerves. So we can see the new perspective, and I think this is the noble insight, the noble concept from the Al-Farabi concept of psychology. By this concept, we can see that it is impossible for us to explain human just for the perspective of the soul, because the soul is just one dimension of the one single entity between the brain, the heart, the nerve, and the bodily organs. I think this is the fundamental issue tonight, and you can find this issue outside this group, because this is a new discovery. This is the new insight, and for me, this issue is open to debate, open to critics from all of you. Okay, the next we go to the peripatetic hypnosina psychology. In principle, what is mentioned and addressed by hypnosina in the tradition of peripatetic psychology is not different with what addressed by Al-Farabi. I just to explain that this issue, concerning the soul, it is clear that based on Avicenna psychology or hypnosina psychology, the animal faculty of the soul and the human rational faculty of the soul are located in the brain. That's the point, okay? The nutritive faculty of the soul, hypnosina not mention if the nutritive faculty located in the brain, but the animal faculty of the soul and the human rational faculty of the soul are clearly stated by hypnosina that the two faculties are located in the brain. Okay. Concerning the heart, what Avicenna stated, same with what Al-Farabi stated, because the perspective comes from the same tradition. It is the peripatetic tradition. Peripatetic is the tradition based on Aristotelian perspective of philosophy. So when I say the peripatetic, it means the roots is come from the Aristotelian philosophical tradition. So what Ibn Sina or Avicenna explain about the human faculty of the soul is not different with what explained by Al-Farabi. The difference is we can find just in the issue of the estimative faculty, or in Arabic term is waham. For Ibn Sina, this estimative faculty is a high authoritative information of the divine information. So the estimative or waham is a divine information. And anomaly, we find anomaly in Indonesia, in my country. Waham is identified with delusion. Delusion is a part of hallucination, the information that is not based on reality or sense perceptive reality. So I think that is a very fundamental anomaly we can find in the Indonesian psychiatric. Next. So Avicenna, according to Avicenna, the beginning of the breath or heat or spirit is a divine emanation from potentiality to actuality. So the breath or the spirit or the heat is in the peripatetic epistemological tradition of psychology is a form of divine emanation. So when we speak about the natural world in the perspective of Ibn Sina psychology or Al-Farabi psychology, it means natural with divine emanation, and different with the natural what we understand about the natural issue today, because the natural issue today is based on materialism or physicalism or materialism. Materialism, they ignore the divine existence of reality. So that's the difference. That's the difference when we speak about the natural world or the natural perspective. And based on Ibn Sina, our soul, our heart, in biological bodily organ of human is a natural entity which comes from the divine emanation. So it's clear. The natural perspective based on Ibn Sina Al-Farabi or Aristotelian tradition is different from the natural definition today, which is based on the materialism. The materialism, they ignore the existence of the divine principle. Okay, concerning the brain, Avicenna pointed that the brain receives its power of life, natural breath, from the heart. Also, again and again, in the peripatetic tradition, they place the brain as a secondary organ after the heart or the calm, in which the brain just receive their power from the heart. So this is clear in the Islamic peripatetic psychological tradition. And for me as a neuroscientist and study again, I must state it again. Inside in my mind, in my head, it's a very beautiful connection about the relation between the spirit, the heat, or the breath with the heart, the calm, and then the brain and then our faculty of the soul, which is located in our parts of the brain, and then from this they spread through the nerve to all parts of our organ of the body. It's a very beautiful entity, single entity, human as a single entity, not duality. We can see the human from the epistemological tradition based on the Tawhid epistemology. So it is nice and can help the Western world to explain the spiritual aspect inside the material world of the brain. So, okay, this is the model, psychological model of man based on the Ibn psychological tradition. We can see that this is not different with what was addressed by Al-Farabi. We can see that human consists of the innate heat or breath inside the heart, and then this heat or breath received by the brain, and then the faculty of the soul are located inside the brain, and then their connection to the bodily organ are facilitated by the nerves. So that's the issue I will address tonight. I'm very sorry because in the first I am very nervous because this is the first time I give a lecture in English. So, but for me, that is not my problem, and that is not the problem, because the problem is I need and I must to address this beautiful concept of the human as a single entity, which consists of the innate heat, breath or spirit, the heart, the brain, the soul, and then the bodily organ. And by this concept, impossible for us to understand the human dimension just from the perspective of the faculty of the soul or philosophy of the soul as explained by our contemporary Islamic scholars. So I think this is my contribute to that fields of knowledge. So the summary, the Islamic peripatetic concept of human, that human consists of the innate heat or breath, and then inside the heart, the brain, the soul, the nerve, and the bodily organs. But what I need to address here is all of this issue, strictly speaking, in the context of human body. Okay, we speak the innate heat, the breath, the heart, the brain, the soul, the nerves, the cold, and so on in the dimension of the human biological body. So the big question is where all of this dimension lie in our anatomical architecture of our body. So I will give you, maybe this is a for you, maybe this is a contradictive or provocative, but in my side, in my responsibility as an Islamic neuroscientist, I must address about this issue. Okay, what I address here is based on what I researched in ISTEC under supervision of my dear Professor Dato Usman Bakar. So this anatomically perspective of the human body from the peripatetic psychological tradition is come from my intensive research, maybe around 4 years in ISTEC. Okay, so from what explained by Al-Farabi and what explained by Ibn Sina, from this perspective, I stated that the heart is the heart anatomical position in the human biological body can have a similar in function with the structure of the brainstem. This is the structure of the brainstem. You see the brainstem consists of the midbrain pons, the medulla. Inside the brainstem, we have the reticular formation, and in the reticular formation, existing the neuron firing. The neuron firing is a principle of life. The neuron firing, based on the medical science in the Western epistemological tradition, the neuron firing in the reticular formation is a principle of life of all living beings. Why? Because our brainstem control all of our organ of the body. So it is the same perspective with what mentioned by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, that the brainstem, they ruling over the all organs of the body, and this position and status of the heart or qalb is same with the status and the role and function of the brainstem. Next, the heart, totally speaking, by Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, and even Ibn Rus, that the heart is an organ with the vital function which control our breathing and our heart. And this function of the heart can only facilitating by the bodily organ, namely the brainstem, because the brainstem, based on the medical science or the neuroscience, brainstem as the center for controlling our respiratory system or breathing and our circulation system or our cardiac, or in commonly now with the heart. But it's different because in my perspective, based on the Islamic epistemological tradition and compare that tradition to the Western neuroscience tradition, the qalb or the heart have the similarity in function, status, and role with the structure of the brainstem. We can discuss later. And now the soul, the issue of the soul. When we speak about the nutritive faculty of the soul, it has two fundamental functions. Relate with first with the nutrition, and the second with the reproduction. So the legacy or the information comes from the Islamic epistemological tradition of Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina. They stated that the nutritive faculty of the soul arises, comes, and have a close relationship with the heart or the qalb. So the anatomical position of the nutritive faculty of the soul, because it is a material soul, it's a physical soul, the position has a very, very close connection with the heart. And based on what Western traditions say, that the part of the brain in which have a strong and close connection with the brainstem is a diencephalon. Diencephalon is the primary part of the brain after the brainstem, with the function is a center for regulation for the nutrition, and the regulation for reproductive system by controlling the producing of the testosterone and progesterone in men and progesterone in women for ovarium. And the endocrine system, they control the nutrition by facilitating by the pancreas and others organ of the body. And the animal soul, I stated here that the animal soul is the rest area, the rest part of the brain after the diencephalon, with exception with the prefrontal cortex, because the prefrontal cortex is unique only to human. Okay, it does have a similar function with the rational faculty of the soul. We know that based on the Islamic epistemological tradition of Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, the human rational faculty is unique only to human. And when we compare it to the brain anatomical structure of the brain, what part of the brain is only unique just to human is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is part of the brain that is just only unique to human compared with the other animals. You can see that we have the dolphin, zebra, and even the chimpanzee. Chimpanzee have a very, very similar in structure with the human brain, but the difference is lie in the structure of the prefrontal cortex. So for me, I stated that the rational faculty of the soul has a similar function, role, and status with the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Okay, so what we can get from this lecture is, the point is, there are 5 aspects of human in the tradition of classical Islamic peripatetic psychology, namely the innate heat or breath or spirit, the heart, the brain, the soul, nerves, limbs, and so on, in which, based on what I mentioned earlier, that the innate heat spirit is identified by the neuron firing at the reticular formation of the brainstem, in where the brainstem itself we identified as a qalb, or the heart, in the epistemological tradition of peripatetic psychology. The heart we identified as the brainstem in the epistemological tradition of Western tradition. So the soul we identify as the nervous system. Nervous system is, this is the nervous system. In the left side, you see the whole body. This is the nervous system. We have the brain and spinal cord as a central nervous system, and we have the peripheral nervous system. I understand this is very difficult for all of you to understand this anatomical issue, because I learned this anatomy around 6 years when I do my medical faculty years ago. So I can understand if for all of you, this issue of this anatomical is a very difficult to understand, and impossible for me to address this perspective only in one lecture in this night. It's very impossible for me. So I just address, and then this slide presentation can share with all of you by the admin, and you can learn more from this slide, because what important for me, based on the Islamic epistemological tradition, in the context of the neuroscience perspective, is already in this slide, all of the perspective. So the soul is identified as the nervous system with the exception to the structure of the brainstem. With the brainstem, we recognize as the heart, okay? And then the vegetative faculty of the soul is identified with the diencephalon because the vegetative faculty of the vegetable soul has two functions. The first is nutrition and the second is reproduction. So it's very close, similar in status, function, and role with the brain structure, namely the diencephalon, because diencephalon is the structure of the brain, which have a role to nutrition and the reproduction. Nutrition facilitated by the endocrine system. If you learn the biochemistry, you can find the issue of the endocrine system. Is related with our metabolism in our body until the cellular metabolism. So the center is in diencephalon. And then the animal faculty, soul, the animal faculty is identified as the rest area of the brain with exception to the prefrontal cortex, diencephalon, and the brainstem. So all of the parts of the brain besides the brainstem, the diencephalon, and the prefrontal cortex are recognized as the animal faculty of the soul because we know the limbic system, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex are contribute to generate the human thought, human cognition, human acting, human action, human emotion, feeling, and so on and so on. So based on the Islamic tradition, the animal faculty has a function in sensation, perception, emotion, passion, and imagination, with the rest area of the brain that I mentioned earlier have the same function with the animal faculty of the soul. This is the rest area that I mean. This is the sensoric area in the parietal cortex. This is the parietal somatosensory area. And this is the motoric area in the frontal cortex. And to understand this function of the brain, it is compulsory for us to have a neuroanatomy and neurophysiology first between we discuss about this issue. Okay, thank you for all of you. And I give this time to my brother, Said Jamaluddin Miri. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, dear brother, Ustad Muhammad. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. This was an amazing lecture. And honestly, we've been hosting over 100 lectures, but this was the first time that we received this type of perspectives when it comes to neuroscience and neuropsychology from an Islamic point of view. And to revisit the works of Al-Farabi and also Ibn Sina and many of our great traditional scholars like Al-Razi, and connected to neuroscience as we understand it today, in a sense, reframing our thoughts of understanding that we as Muslims have contributed to this field tremendously, which partially is accepted in the Western thought today. Partially they do recognize Ibn Sina, they do recognize Al-Razi, but it's partially, not fully. And secondly, also the importance of verticality when it comes to speaking about neuroscience, because a lot of us who studied or are studying in psychology departments all over the world in different universities, we tend to see how secular the approach is towards neuroscience, where they only focus on the horizontality of things, not the verticality on things. And what you did, which was like giving me baklava, like it was so sweet, you know, it was like a sweet, enjoyable treat for my thoughts and for, I think, all of our brothers and sisters' perspectives, is that you said that the qalb goes before the aql. And with the aql, I'm not meaning the Islamic notion of aql, I mean the Western notion of cognitions. While in the Western approach to neuropsychology is the opposite. Everything starts with cognition. As Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So the whole aspect of rationalism has affected the modern subjectivity and the modern subject to view the cognition, and then the behaviors to be the king, and rest is secondary. While we as Muslims and as people who are passionate about the field of Islamic psychology do know that the qalb is the center of well-being. So when you stated that from a neuroscience point of view, we need to utilize your knowledge when we take these discussions with our fellow colleagues who are more entrenched in the secular approach. So thank you so much, Ustad Muhammad. It was such an honor to listen to you. And dear brothers and sisters, feel free to give digital applause or physical applause to our excellent Ustad. It's a lot of questions in the chat, Ustad Muhammad. A lot of people who really appreciated your beautiful lecture, and we hope that we can host you more in more of our venues in the future, both internationally, but also in ISIP Indonesia and ISIP Malaysia as well, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, dear Ustad. So let's start by addressing some of the questions that some of our excellent participants have addressed to you, Ustad Muhammad. The first question comes from our brother Amir Amin. He is asking, Ustad Muhammad, as far as I understand, when I speak, neurons are fired in my brain. Whether neurons are fired first in the brain and as a result of that I speak, or I speak first and as a result of that neurons are fired in the brain. In the former case where firing neurons are causing me to speak, what has caused neurons to fire in the first instance, and where is the first causer in the neural network? And if the latter case, where my speaking is causing the neurons to fire in my brain, what has caused me to speak in the first instance, and can there be any biological or neurological basis of my speaking then? That's the question, brother.
Okay, so maybe our brother addressed about the issue of the neuron firing as the molecular basis of the human action or human thought. Yes, that's the point that we can get from the modern Western perspective, because they already stated that all of what our feeling, what our action, what our thing, what our mind are totally based on the nerve cells with intention. The process in the synapse. The synapse is the junction between one neuron makes communication with the other's neuron, and the synapse is the junction between. So the neuron firing is the molecular or biological basis for all of our mind activity. All of the human activity is based on the neuron firing. What I address in my lecture tonight is I consider that the heat or breathe, because the heat is based on the root or fire us based on root or nar, and the neuron firing is also, if we go to the philosophical tradition of illumination, philosophical tradition by Suhrawardi, we can look closely that inside our heart, that is a light. So all of our mental function, it comes from the light. What is light? Light is based on nur, and nur, maybe my brother said, have a clear understanding about what the difference between the nur and the nar, because as I know, the nur and the nar comes from the same root. So I think I consider the neuron firing inside the brainstem has similarity in status and role with what mean by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina with the heat, or what we mean by Suhrawardi with the light, because the essence of the neuron firing is a light. If you go to the microscopic or go to the brain imaging, you can see the activity of the neuron firing is already a light. And what the issue is, in the Islamic epistemological tradition, they stated that the heart is a source of knowledge. Okay, is a source of knowledge, is the heart, and within the heart there is the heat, the fire, the firing. When we dreams, when we sleep, and when we dreams, the neuroscience finding, the research from the neuroscience finding that when we sleep, it's just only 4 parts of our brain active. The first is the brainstem. The brainstem I consider as the cold. The second is the amygdala, the center of emotion. The third is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is the center of our memory. And the last is the visual center of the brain. The rest area of the brain inactive, not active. What's mean from this finding? This mean is the brainstem produce the vision, the vision that is not based on our sense organ when during our sleep. Okay, that's the first finding. The second finding is the neuropsychiatry. They finding that the brainstem are responsibility to facilitate the hallucination and illusion, because the neuroscientists finding that the lesion of abnormality structure in the brainstem made the schizophrenia. What is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a hallucination, both the visual hallucination or auditory hallucination. What we can get from this point? The point is the brainstem can facilitate the vision and the auditory, the seeing and the hearing that is not based on our sense. That's the point. And this perspective has a same role with the heart, because the heart, based on the Islamic tradition, during the sleep, the heart presents the divine information to our mind, So that's
Ustad Muhammad, I think that your connection frozen. Ustad Muhammad? Dear brothers and sisters, I think that Ustad Muhammad's connection was caught. So we'll give him a couple of minutes. Is it only I who can't see? Is it only me?
Just to explain this a bit.
You know, it's kind of like we can take the connection with Zoom as an analogy, a metaphor for the neurons and how they're connected.
Yes, connection between each other.
Now we got the nur back by seeing your beautiful face, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. Do you feel like you answered the question, or would you like to add something else before we go to next question?
Okay, before to go to next question, I consider the neuron firing, what's mentioned by our brother, is a neuron firing, is I consider and identified, it is the same function, status, and role with what by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina mean with the heat or breathe. And maybe if you can go forward to the illumination psychology tradition of Suhrawardi, you can find that inside the heart or cup, there is exists the lights. So the lights, the heat, and the neuron firing for me is the same form as a light, Okay, thank you.
MashaAllah. I love that you're connected to Sohrawardi. And his whole theory of illumination and the Ishraqi psychology.
Ishraqi.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. There's actually a lot of good translations from Arabic to English with the Ishraqi psychology. Maybe we can share them to all of you.
Yes, maybe you can share to all of us.
Yeah, inshallah. So join our Islamic psychology WhatsApp groups if you're not joining since before, dear brothers and sisters and participants, and we will share. Sister Nadira, if you can share the link to the WhatsApp group again. Jazakallah khairan, sister. We really appreciate it. MashaAllah, amazing. Barakallahu feekum, brother. So next question is from Brother Wahab Uddin. He's asking, is animal faculty, can it be regarded as jibilat? Maybe we should let him ask directly. Brother Wahabuddin, are you in the session still?
Yeah.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, feel free to ask the question.
And thanks a lot for the session. Yeah. So when Brother Muhammad was telling, so it came to my mind because recently I'm going through a literature where we are discussing about the differences between the Jibillah and the Fitra. So I just want to know that the animal faculty is related to the Jibillah of ourselves or something else.
Okay, our brother asking about the relation about the animal faculty in our biological bodily structure. Okay, so the nature based on the peripatetic tradition, we have the same structure with the animals. We have same in total. The difference just lie in our rational faculty of soul. So we can conclude that human without the rational faculty of the soul is animal. Is the same with the animal. Okay. So if we go to the anatomical structure of our body, we consider that the rational faculty is related with the structure of the prefrontal cortex. This prefrontal structure is our capacity to think, to distinguish the good and the evil, to take decision, to make judgment, and then to make the reflective. So is the function of our prefrontal cortex. And this function is related with what the classical Islamic psychology mean with the human rational faculty, because the human rational faculty consists of the practical intellect and the theoretical intellect. The practical intellect is potential intellect. The practical intellect function is to distinguish the good and the evil. The good, to make a judgment, relate with our morality. This is a rational faculty. So it's the same status, role, and function with the prefrontal cortex. So when we speak about the animal faculty, it is related to the structure of our brain, our body, with exception to the prefrontal cortex. So I can strictly speaking that the human without the rational faculty of the soul, of the human without the prefrontal cortex, is animal, is animal in nature. Because animal, they have the cold, they have the heart, they have the nutritive faculty of the soul, and they have the animal faculty consists of the sensitive, the perceptive, the imaginative, the appetitive. Appetitive is related with our love, desire, hate, and so on. That is our passion, our feeling is the appetitive faculty. And then our imaginative faculty. That's the human rational, the animal faculty of the soul, in my presentation I stated that the structure of the brain, which is related with the animal structure of the brain, is the whole structure of the brain with exception to the structure of prefrontal cortex. So thank you.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, Ustad. And great question, Brother Wahabuddin. Thank you. So next question, and we're mindful that we're already over time. So Ustad, do you have like 5 minutes left? Perhaps we can just take a couple of questions, or is it okay for you?
Okay, no problem. I just follow your rules because you're the heart, I just the brain.
MashaAllah. That's great. Alhamdulillah. You know, we're so cognitive focused in this society that when you're listening to the way you're portraying how we should think about cognition, alhamdulillah, it's like a breath of fresh air, mashallah. Thank you. All right, next question is Ustad from Rahyu Hilmi. He's asking, I would ask to Mr. Speaker regarding habitual action. There are many contents that influence our youth generation, especially porn materials on the internet. So how to deal with about this issue? Secondly, there are many juveniles that ignore to take a pray 5 times a day, in spite of they have already know well about this sins, about disobey of religion rule. So what is, I mean, the first part of the question is very important. How does that affect? If I can reiterate the first part of the question, regarding our habitual action, there are many contents that influence our youth generation, especially porn materials on the internet. So how do we deal about this issue?
Wait for a second. I try. Okay. About the habitual action. Okay. Let's me to address that. Based on the tradition, Islamic tradition, and the modern science tradition, we have 2 actions. The first is the nature, maybe nature. The action based on the nature, you can find all of this action to the animals. Okay, I make research in the birds, and I experiment, I make observation the behavior of the birds, the parrot, because the parrot is a type of the bird with have a smart in cognition. They have smart. So by observe what the action based on the nature, you can look the behavior of the animals. And what the point we can got that's the nature, the behavior from the animals, that all of the animals' behavior is noble. We can find, it's impossible for us to find the corruption behavior in animals. Okay, for example, when the COVID attack and the human animals, me and all of us is human animals, and human animals go inside their home to make the isolation during the COVID pandemic. What happened in our environment? Our environment will be fresh, will be healthy. So the problem of the behavior, corruption in behavior, is lie on the just only to human. The animals' behavior, there is no corruption at all, because their behavior are totally noble. Their behavior totally submit to the natural law. The animals cannot go out and run away from the natural law. The animal totally submit to the natural tendency, and that is our fitrah, for me, in my perspective. Okay, and the second, the action based on the nurturing, or what is learn and doing by doing. Because when we do something, our neuron make connection with another neuron as a basis, as a biological basis for our behavior. For all of new experience, for all of new experience, if you new experience, you go to university, you meet the new friend, your neuron make connection with the other neuron as a biological basis for your experience. So that's the basis of habitual action, because this habitual action not only action because they have a biological basis, they have a nerve architecture. Same with you building a new house. So a new house for one behavior, new action. When you go to the another action, new action, your neuron inside your brain building a new circuit. We call it, the modern science call it with the neuron circuit. So neuron circuit is a basis, is a biological basis for a habitual action. So it's a very difficult for us to leave our bad action, because it's not just to leave it, because you must erase the circuit structure inside your brain in which that is biological basis of your behavior, of your action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, mashallah. Thank you, Ustad. Great answer. So let's go to next question here. It's from Brother Thomas Al-Akbar. He's asking, Ustad, apologies, how can we increase or maintain the health of our heart neurologically? I practice myself in tasawwuf teaching. Does it give good impact neurologically for me? I've found the same theory about our spiritual health and the function of the heart in meditation teaching. What is the opinion of Mr. Fikri about it?
Okay, the issue about how to maintain our heart. Okay, so strictly speaking, this our heart called, which is is our brainstem. So heart and cold, in my perspective, totally refer to the structure of the brainstem, not go to the structure of our heart is inside our chest. No, it's very differently structured. I consider the heart is the brainstem, or the cold is the brainstem inside in the base of our head. So how to maintain it? The first, we must know what the nature of our brainstem. It is difficult for us to manage our heart if we go to the wrong organ. When we go to the wrong organ, you cannot make something that is benefit for your health if you go to the wrong organ. So when you go to the right organ, the brainstem, we consider that we must know that the brainstem is a biological constitutional law of our body. So the brainstem is a biological constitutional law of our body. All A to Z about yourself is already installed in your brainstem. Okay? About your heart rate, normal capacity of your oxygen in your blood, how the transport mechanism inside your cell, how if you make the hike activity, your body is excreting the fluid level. All of these are totally controlled by the brainstem. For example, when we got the infection, when we eat the bad food, the infection food, the food infection by microorganism, we have the diarrhea. We have a problem with our intestinal. That is mechanism controlled by our heart. What the point of the heart? to survivability. You must survive. You must live, because life is a deen. Life is a deen. Because life is a religion. Because life, we must live. Life is a principle in all of our foundation concept. So the brainstem is the biological constitutional law. The second, when we think some issue that is potential harm, and can destroy our body, our heart will respond it with increasing the heart rate. So the increasing the heart rate level is the first signal if our heart respond to some stimulus. When it is stimulus. So when people got anxiety, depression, sad, and so on, it's the signal from our brainstem if we go to some problem. So we must go away from that problem. We must save our life. So all of this constitutional law, biological constitutional law, is already programmed in our brainstem, in our calf. So what we need to maintain this issue, we must totally submit to this natural tendency inside our heart. Okay? And what we can, I find one book from the Sheikh Naqib Al-Attas. The title is The Foundation of Ethics and Morality. In that book, he addressed about the issue of religion, in which comes from the root of deen, which one of the meaning of the deen is natural inclination, natural tendency. So this deen is natural law. So what's the part of our body is nature, the center of nature? The tradition of Islamic say that is a qalb. Qalb is the center, the source of natural innate, natural power, natural heat, breath, or light in Surawardi epistemological tradition. And when we come to make comparison with the modern epistemological tradition, especially the medical science, we found that all of this biological constitutional law is already registered in our brainstem. So when we go to the wrong way from this natural tendency, we can got some problem with our heart. So how to know the natural tendency related to behavior? Let's we observe the animals, because the animals do all the behavior that allows by the natural law. Animals, they do not do some action with not allowed by natural laws. Animals don't do that, but human, they do that. They corruption, they not give alms, they take the money from the fakir. Okay, all of this behavior counterproductive with our natural tendency. Is based on the scientific. So this is why until today, our medical science cannot decline the anxiety, because the anxiety cannot be, you cannot erase the anxiety from yourself, because the anxiety is naturally signs if we go to the wrong behavior. When we do the wrong behavior, we naturally got the anxiety, fear, sadness, and sometimes we go to the depression. Maybe just like that, I can explain to you, brother.
MashaAllah, that was a great explanation. It's very interesting. Like, actually, there is some interesting modalities in Western psychology referring to some form of somatic experiencing.
Yes, somatic.
In order to take away trauma from your body,
Yeah.
you need to allow the body naturally to get it out of the system, because a lot of our traumas are encapsulated within the systems of our bodies. And they're alluding to, for instance, when animals are being hunted and are fleeing from a threatful situation, they sometimes perhaps pass out and they lay down on the, let's say, just lay down dead, even though they're not dead. And as they survive the threat, you can see how the body is channelizing out all the trauma that has been encapsulated within the system, like almost like a shock. They're like, shaking. And then after a while, when they come out from that state, they can just walk around totally healthy. Subhanallah. And from a point of view of humans, we tend to not channelize out this in a natural way. We tend to suppress this trauma, and then you can see it actually being channelized in a destructive or a maladaptive way. For instance, fibromyalgia, which is something that is quite common among, both sisters, in particular sisters, but even brothers have it. Or let's say IBS or other psychosomatic, related issues. So it's quite interesting where you're alluding to the natural tendencies of animals and how we sometimes could be corrupted in our ways. But also, of course, we should not live out our natural instincts if it's not connected to the Sharia, right? So it's kind of like a balance here to be very moderated. I love to speak more about this, Ustad. It's such an interesting reflections and questions. We have time for one last question, all right, dear brothers and sisters. I will combine two questions here. Let's see here. So MC is writing, why are certain memories that are visual in representation or action experience so strong and re-emerge frequently compared to what is heard, read, or seen?
Okay, about the issue about the memory. So what the memory? Memory is everything touched with your five senses. That is the memory. Okay, but the memory in the concept, it has two memory. First, memory you can get by your experience. Okay, you maybe can relate this concept with the tabula rasa or the John Locke concept of mind. Okay, that human bird like a white paper and we just draw. And the other side, memory, pre-consciousness memory that already innate, installed in your mind before you birth in the world. So we have the two memory. The first memory is the innate memory, instinct memory. It is nature. The center of this memory inside in our brainstem, because the literature, the research already discovered that the brainstem are participating in the memory. That's an innate memory. And the other memory, the memory is you can find by the experience. So sometimes the memory relate with the emotion, passion. So I'm already said that when we sleep, there is few parts of the brain are active. The first is the brainstem. The second is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is memory. The third is the amygdala, and the last is our visual. What we see, the center of our visual system, is lie in our occipital lobes or the cerebrum. If you go to learn the anatomical of the brain, you can find the lobus occipitalis. This is the center of our visual system. So why some memory very intense and difficult for us to live it? Because this memory relate with our intention. What's your intention? What your emotion, intention? Memory with the trauma, your visual, what you see are totally based on what you're feeling. because your action, what you see, what you hear, and what you see and what you hear, when the information arise in your eyes, in your ear, and when this information reaches the understanding brain, the prefrontal area, the information is not same. Okay, different information, because the information which benefit from the subcortical structure. What is subcortical structure? Is the animal structure of the brain. It's a natural part of our body, of our mind. And this is a deterministic, not free will. The problem of determinism and free will, the subcortical structure, which is the animal structure until the heart, it is the deterministic. It's difficult for us to discuss with this structure. It's impossible. We can discuss only with free mind, our prefrontal area. This is our free will. Will free is our prefrontal area. So when your intention is related to the one object, it will make your memory only recalling again and again what is already exists in your emotion. Okay? Because our choice totally depend on what our passion, what our emotion, just a little space for our rational capacity. Big part is related with our emotion, and our emotion determine what is you recalling inside your memory. So that is the explanation why we remember some event strongly again and again, because it's binding with our emotion, our appetitive faculty of the soul. And animal, they have this capacity. They have memory, they have emotion, they have passion, they have imagination. But they don't have intellection. Just the difference, just a little of that. So I think the answer is why some event is strong in memory, because it's related with our emotion, our emotion, and the science prove that. Prove that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of social psychology also refers, I mean, it's also a bias in a sense sometimes that we only remember things that we emotionally could relate to, because then things that we might not emotionally relate to, we might disregard, even though that could be important for others. SubhanAllah, it's been an amazing lecture, Ustad, honestly, and we would love to invite you again. I think I speak from behalf of all of our participants, all excellent brothers and sisters, and all of my colleagues at ISIP. We will be very much honored to host you again. Maybe we do a part 2, inshallah.
Okay, no problem.
Because it will be so interesting to further.
I'm glad to join with all of you.
MashaAllah.
Thank you. This is the best forum for me to address the issue of Islamic neuroscience.
MashaAllah. We will be honored to work with you, Ustad, and to disseminate your vast amount of knowledge, inshallah, to all of our members, inshallah. Brother Wahabuddin actually asked, when you refer to qalb as brain, you mean the brain stem? Is that what you're referring to? Qalb as brain stem?
Yes.
Yeah. Qalb as brain.
That's my point. The qalb is the similar function, status, and role with the brain stem.
MashaAllah. And he also says in between spirit and nafs, we have brain and heart, right? So spirit, nafs, brain, and heart. That's how is that the case in the way you address it?
Yes, because I address that the spirit inside the heart, and then the first soul arise from the natural spirit, this innate heat, is a nutritive soul, and then the animal soul, and then the human rational soul, and based on the peripatetic tradition, the animal and the human rational soul are located in the brain. So the soul is material. For the Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rus, even Ibn Rus, they stated that our soul is material. So no, our soul is not material as we acknowledge today. So that's the point, because when we address this issue, we can see that all happens in the physical dimension, in the natural perspective. Because for this tradition, the natural itself is a divine emanation from the God. So that's a difference between our perspective of natural based on this Islamic tradition and the natural based on the materialism. Because the natural of the materialism, they ignore the divine property, divine tendency. Whereas if we go to the Islamic tradition, this natural is a divine emanation. Yeah, so that's my point.
MashaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, Ustad Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you tawfiq in your important research. And we love to work with you, inshallah. We will invite you more often to us, inshallah. Thank you so much, dear brothers and sisters and participants, for joining this session today. We went over time with 25 minutes. Thank you so much, Ustad Muhammad, for being so generous. Thank you. We really appreciate your generosity. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters, for having so much sabr with us. I hope we addressed so many of your questions as we could.